Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
You don't sound happy at all. But I am happy. So, I work at CIMMYT in Nairobi, and for the past few years I've been involved in conservation agriculture, and we'll be showing you some insights, our experiences with CA. So the outline of the talk is that I will talk a little bit about the constraints, a bit of the reality that we face when we work with CA. Then I'll talk about the potential benefits of CA. Then I have a video of an expert, a colleague we work together. We'll probably show that at the end. Then I'll also touch a little bit about what is needed in the future. So, as a background, I'm not the one who drew this. But if you go to that website, they say that Africa is endowed with land, such that all these big countries, USA, UK, Japan, China, and all of Europe, can fit in the whole of Africa. So we see that Africa has so much potential, but still it cannot feed itself. So what are the issues? That's the big question. So the evidence is in there. If you compare the yield of maize, for example, to the world production, you see that Africa is still very low. Just a few hotspots, for example, Egypt, maybe in around 5 tons, but the average of the whole continent is around 2 tons. This is a worrying trend. Yeah. So what are the issues? One of the issues is that our soil fertility is very low. In most cases, we have sandy soils of very poor soil fertility, although sometimes we have pockets of fertile red clay soils. Sometimes we see that because of limited nutrient inputs, current production systems always lead to accelerated soil fertility decline. So we need ways to build the soil fertility so that we sustainably increase yield. Another issue is that most of the production is under rain-fed conditions. There's nothing much we can do with rainfall. We don't control how rainfall is distributed within the season or across seasons. So, okay. When you look at for example, rainfall across seasons in this example, you might see that the variability is not so large. But now, when you compare seasons, for example, on the right side, you see that the distribution, for example, in this graph, after 100 days, you see that there's a difference of about 200 millimeters, and this coincides with the critical point of silking of maize, for example. So this is very critical. But there's not much we can do about the distribution of rainfall, but we can manage the cropping systems. So the other issue is what we see in the smallholder farming systems is that they are dominated by crop livestock systems. So in these systems, you find that the crop residues are important for livestock feed. And in most systems where there's livestock, farmers prioritize the sustenance of livestock. And then they get manure, so you see the interdependence of the system. So the crop residues are needed for the livestock feed. The livestock produce manure, which is also needed for crop production. So this is a typical example of a dry season. So you still have livestock in the homestead, but you have nothing to feed them. So in the natural pastures, there's completely nothing. So the degraded pastures actually intensify the conflicts of crop residue uses. And there are limited options because of essentially lack of rainfall. And you also see, even though land is becoming scarce, but there are still existing some extensification systems, for example, in Mozambique, where they do slash and burn. So they use that burning as a form of nutrient management. So they essentially lack manure, fertilizer, or improved germplasm. And one other critical feature is that the extension systems are usually very weak. Next. Yeah. So another element that we have to deal with is that farmers are not homogeneous. They own different resources. For example, the picture up there is in relative terms, this is a wealthy farm. Compared to that one, the household is larger, but they don't have resources. They could be having a lot of labor, but they don't have money to purchase inputs. Yeah. Another example is very old farmers, not enough land, not enough labor. So when we design systems, we need to be clear in mind that we are dealing with heterogeneous groups, different resources, different opportunities, different production orientations. So we can represent this in a very simple schematic diagram. So normally we often have three different types of farmers. We have the wealthy, who usually own livestock, a lot of livestock, and also fertilizer inputs, and normally produce for the market. Then we have those in the middle. They also have middle resources, quite a few livestock, and also a little bit of fertilizer. They have larger land. Then we have the poorest of farms with little inputs and little options to diversify. Yeah. So the question that we ask is where to target. We all know that decisions are made at the farm level, but often we target the plot. We come with our technologies, we tested the plot, we measure our yield, we say, okay, the yield is higher. But what does that mean at the farm level? Because that's where decisions are made on what to plant, how much inputs to allocate, what investment options are there. Next. Sometimes we also deal with the issues of mindset. We find in systems where we work, some farmers just believe that to start farming you have to plow, and you have to plow deep, 23 centimeters. And sometimes they do that just soon after harvesting, and they will repeat again before planting. So these are the conflicts that we deal with. Next. The other reality is that farm sizes are shrinking. So if you look at the mean per capita, which is per person in the household, we are talking of mostly less than 1 hectare per person. So the question that we ask is, what sort of benefit can you derive from such very small farms? So these are the real issues that we deal with when we work with small-scale farmers. So in summary, what we see is that CA is needed, but where it's needed is also where it's most difficult to practice. So we need a multi-sectoral approach to overcome these challenges. Yeah, next. So in the past, the old strategy was to come to the farmers with a basket of technologies. We talk of CA, we talk of green manures, we talk of agroforestry, improved fertilizers. So the idea was that you offer farmers a basket so they'll be able to choose according to their situation, what was called the best bet strategy. But now, since the last decade, there's been a new focus strictly on conservation agriculture, which we all know it's a combination of these three principles, and they should be done simultaneously. But we also see that some good agronomic practices, such as improved varieties, timely and correct weeding, fertilizer application, those are also needed for farmers to really benefit from CA. These are critical. So CA is also considered climate smart, which means it remains profitable, it maintains yield even under very adverse conditions. It's associated with high water and nutrient use efficiencies. So because of retention of crop residues, it is also associated with reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. We can, just a schematic representation, why CA? So basically in this region is for two things in the short term. That is, the mulch on the surface is able to increase rainfall infiltration, which is almost, because rainfall is always limited, so we want increased infiltration in the soil. Then at the same time, we want to limit the evaporation from the soil surface. So this is the short-term need for CA. That's why it's very important. Again. So in terms of potential gains, you can see, looking at what farmers currently do in most systems, if they could use the direct seeder from in combination with improved hybrids and fertilizer, you can see that there's an increase of about 225% from current production. That's why CA is important. Yeah. Also, this is sort of a summary of our regional trials. So on the x-axis, that's the conventional tillage. On the y-axis, that's the conservation agriculture tillage. So there's a one-to-one line. If the yield is above that line, it means the conservation agriculture treatment is yielding better. If it's below, it means conventional is doing better than CA. So you can see there, from low-yielding environments, you can actually double the yield with CA. But you also see that there are systems where conventional tillage does better. So we want to understand why this is the case. So this is this was from a meta-analysis. We see that sometimes the challenge with moving from conventional to CA is that in the initial years, because sometimes of weeds build up and sometimes you don't get the management right, you often get a depressed yield. But then when time goes on, you almost like maintain your good yield. So we need options to deal with this initial. Yes, again. So this is another example, but now with crop rotation with legumes. You can still see that in the initial years, still the yields are depressed. But in the long term, you actually get an increase, which is also maintained. So this shows the critical importance of rotation in CA. Yeah. Again, another way of showing if the dashed line is the line of no effect. So on the bar below, you see that this is continuous maize system. You see that it's almost no effect. But when you put legume rotation, you shift your graph to the right, you increase your benefits, your yield benefits. Yeah. So when you look at seasonal importance of rainfall, this is the yield difference between conservation agriculture and the current production systems. You see that the most benefits of CA occur when under low rainfall conditions. So when you increase your rainfall, the amount of rainfall received, you see that the yield benefits actually decrease. So CA is critical in low rainfall situations. The same, we do the same with nitrogen. As I said earlier, nutrient management is important. So you see that when you actually increase your nitrogen input in the systems, you get also more yield. Yeah, this is a good example of the difference between seasons. Sometimes even you get benefits, but these benefits are not constant across season. This is a comparison of two sites with different soils, a sandy and a clay soil. You can see that in the sandy soil, the effect of the season is not so much, because these are essentially nutrient-limited situations. But when you go to the clay soils, which are often nutrient-rich, you see a big jump, a gap between different seasons, because one season was poor, the other one was better, and the response was also good. Another important component of CA is the legume intercropping, especially the relay system. Here I show an example where the season was very, very bad in the initial stages. So the picture on the right there is a wilting maize, but then the season improved later in the season, and farmers planted cowpea. So you can see how good the cowpea was later in the season, but the maize totally failed. So legume intercropping as a component of CA is also very, very important. Then another system which is also working very well, but along the CA lines, is the ratoon in Pigeonpea. So this system, you maintain productivity, you reduce your seed costs across seasons, and then because of the ratoon crop, there's no need for tillage, essentially. Yeah. And also this system in the long term, because of the high productivity of the Pigeonpea and the late maturity, doesn't allow cattle to graze in, then there's accumulation of mulch, which increases the sustainability of the system. I meant to show this video, but we'll try at the end. So, this is how we have been working without planning. So organizations coming from one end, others coming from the other, we fail to meet in the middle. Why is this the case? So going forward, we need teamwork. At least we need to understand the needs, expectations, and capabilities of resource-poor farmers. So I suggest that when going forward, we use what we call innovation platforms. So this, we bring different actors, farmers, traders, food processors, researchers, government, etc., not based on immediate benefits, but based on the idea that we want to improve the productivity of smallholder agriculture. So this kind of platform can help us understand the farmers better, understand the systems, and understand the trajectories where they want to go. So in this kind of framework, we still need the researchers, we need the service providers, input suppliers, manufacturers, all this coming together. But the question is always, how do we maintain this kind of platform? Because for private players, what they are looking for is profits. How do we make farming profitable? For us researchers, those questions can drive us, can give us energy to understand the system. But for service providers, the issue is about income. So how do we keep them engaged on the platform? These are the questions. So we also encourage experiential learning with farmers, where we establish a feedback mechanism. So we go to the farms where farmers are, understand their systems, not just drive and come back one day without really knowing the system. Yeah. Demonstrations, still very important. Some farmers still don't know about CA. We need to get to them. So for example, this is what we put up. We're showing maize varieties in combination with conservation agriculture. So we put up a very big billboard to show the benefits. There's still equipment needs that are relevant to the smallholder systems. For example, this is an imported fertility direct seeder. How do we make it suitable for the farmer systems? Ox drone. So for example, in Zimbabwe, we partnered with an organization called GrowNet. They could adapt it to the systems, but farmers' demand remained very, very low. So their participation in the project really went down. So we need to start thinking, how do we modify the equipment that we have to be suitable for the systems that farmers are working in? So these are the issues and challenges with equipment. Sometimes we find that most farmers do have hand tools. Although we talk about mixed crop livestock systems, in most cases it's only 40% of farmers who own livestock who can actually use ox-drawn plows. So we need tools that are relevant to the circumstances of the farmers. Weed control, this is another very important issue. So as I said before, early years are associated with high weed pressure, which leads to high labor demand or herbicides use. But when we talk about sustainable agriculture, does that include use of herbicides? So we need to find ways to at least reduce weed seed setting, maybe as a strategy to reduce weed pressure in the long term. So in the long term, we want to reduce actually the use of herbicides. Yeah, another very critical issue is how do we achieve adequate soil cover given the competition with the livestock? It's often mentioned that 3 tons of residues is the minimum, but of course you get incremental benefits with more residues, maybe up to 6-8 tons. But if you look at the productivity of farmers right now, it's much below 3 tons per hectare. So we probably need alternative feed so that we take the residues and use as mulch. But it's still shaky. We still need research to answer these questions. So another issue is we see that land size and labor availability often define how crop residues are used. Yeah. Another important issue in CA is the policies across governments. What we see is the policies are still fragmented. There's no unison in terms of what governments are saying about CA. But a good example is in Zambia. As early as 1998, they formally adopted CA as a typical government policy. So we could probably use that as a starting point and lobby for more policy across governments to promote CA. So, after saying all this, what we need is probably better targeting and flexibility. Should we still just demand that CA should always have the 3 principles simultaneously, or farmers should be able to adapt them according to their situations? So when we do promotion of CA, we need to keep in mind the constraints that are there, as well as the strengths and opportunities that also exist. So targeting should be according to ecological zones, as I said, because of the interactions between rainfall and soils, and also according to the farm types, because the farm types determine the resources that farmers have, and also their production orientation. Yeah. So after proper targeting, we should be able to reach a point where we should be able to say that at any situation, what is the no-till option I have? Is it a jet planter? Is it a direct seeder? Is it a hand hoe? What is the rotational sequence that I plan for my maize? What mulch cover, which type and how much? The fertilizer application, the 4 R's of nutrient stewardship, the right source, right type, right rate. All these components should be there. What crop varieties should I have? And other management decisions. So I think if we get to this point, then we talk about real targeting. Yeah. So in conclusions, I would say that there are potential for CA, but how do we translate what we measure in the plot to be of any benefit to the farm, given the constraints, the socio-economic and biophysical conditions? But we also think that through innovation, we can, like the innovation platform, we can transform some of these challenges to opportunities to increase production. So the future actually requires a combined effort, not that we do things alone without partnership, because an organization sometimes does well in one aspect, but not in every aspect. Sometimes we lack the soft skills of communicating with farmers. So we need a combined effort with the policymakers, service suppliers, to improve farmers' conditions. I thank you for your interest.
You've managed time very well. If you have a question, Get ready.
I think you have got first to forgive me, because when you retire, you also go blank. In my experience, especially in the dry areas, you have competition between livestock, firewood, and above all, in those dry areas, termites are very serious. Have you done the benefit, whether there is something left, especially when you see the termite in our region? The second thing is that you are dealing with small-scale farmers who want answers now. They are not interested in 2 or 3 years. And you are telling us that maybe the benefit comes in 2 or 2nd or 3rd year. What have you looked at that? And sometimes in my previous, by the way, I worked with the CIAT for 34 years. I've just retired. The third thing is that initially I heard that this thing was doing very well in Australia, it's doing well in North America, and so on. And maybe it is geared towards large-scale farmers. Have we tried to scale it down to see the benefit or the resistance or accepted by small-scale farmers? Small-scale farmers. Do we have research background written in our case with the small-scale farmers?
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much for these questions. These are not simple questions at all. I mean, starting with the last one, I showed a table with the shrinking farm sizes. So that question about what is the size of farm that makes sense to engage in profitable farming has not been answered. And if you look at CA, where it originated in systems where farmers have bigger farms. So they make use of larger equipment, then they achieve economies of scale in savings in fuel cost. So, but I don't think there's a simplistic answer to say that it will not work. Then on the question of the initial lag in yield benefits, this is real. As in any shift in situation, I think if you don't grasp the concepts initially very well, I mean, it's not just the farmers who can't grasp the concepts. Several of us in this room cannot, in terms of implementation. So we should allow this, but the question is, how do we encourage farmers to keep engaged in the initial years when the yield is going down? So these are the issues that we still need to answer. Then issues to do with crop residues. These conflicts are real. And even in dry areas, I put a statement that where CA is needed is where it's most difficult to practice. Because when it's that dry and hot, if you leave the residues on the surface, the termites will come. That means you need more labor, probably to store away the crop residue. But do the farmers have that labor to? What is the opportunity cost? So, yeah, we still need to answer those. Thank you.
Ok, il y a beaucoup d'expériences réussies que nous avons vues dans la présentation.
There are a lot of success that you have presented.
Alors, mais j'ai 3 préoccupations.
I have 3 preoccupations.
La première préoccupation est que dans les images, on nous a présenté une expérience réussie à travers le non-labour dans un sol que je dirais déjà fertile.
In one of the experience, you show us an experience that they are not tilling the soil in a dry land.
Donc, je dis un sol fertile parce que quand je compare ça au sud de l'Afrique, au Sahara, comme le Burkina, c'est déjà un sol riche pour nous. Et ma question, cette préoccupation, c'est de savoir est-ce que réellement on peut faire le non-labour sur un sol aride, puisque je voulais comprendre. Et surtout, je souhaiterais même qu'on nous présentait au moins 2 images pour nous montrer au moins un sol aride et un sol riche.
Hello, now, he's asking, you have presented, we live in Africa, Sub-Saharan African, sometimes the soil is not fertile, and that we need to till the soil, and another one is fertile, that we don't need to till the soil. And how will that work out very well according to what we have been presenting?
I didn't get quite well the question, but I think you are asking that you have fertile soil and rich soil, both types, and where to do tillage and where not to do tillage. The question is, my answer is that we don't need to till anywhere.
All right, thank you. Low Papayas, I come from Uganda, Karamoja region. Karamoja is one of our dry condition area. You have talked of several issues. Anyway, I trust you have experience in what you have just talked. You have mentioned issues to do with the targeting, like especially the ecological zoning. You should look at the ecological zones. Now in Karamoja there are many land uses. One of them is agriculture, crop farming. There is livestock, that's extensive system. It's not a kind of dairy or what, it's an extensive system where pastoralists have to move always. They compete for this waste of crops, especially the residues after harvest. The harvest has many uses. Homestead constructions, also the waste of uses like for local brew making. That's how the waste are used. So I was looking at how can CA help farmers to think about the uses of the residue, especially when it comes to harvest season. Another thing is Karamoja as a dry land also has ecological zones. Even if it is dry, there are wetter belts of the region where production of crops can take place. Then I was looking at CA. CA is biased to maize production when I read most documentations. Karamoja is always forced to grow sorghum, and because it grows well over there, and the food needs of the people depends on sorghum and livestock. So how will CA change its mode of operation from maize biased to maybe other cropping systems? Maybe like sorghum, bulrush, and millet, because it is grown over there popularly. Thank you.
Okay, starting from the last, I work for CIMMYT, and our mandate is maize. And we encourage you to eat a lot of maize. So, well, we work in maize-based systems. I have no experience with working with sorghum. This is very clear, yeah. But I think that the issues are the same in terms of crop residue management. What we're encouraging is probably, if you can't find alternative feed for your livestock, you probably do intercropping, then you make use of the live mulch cover. For example, if you use the quickly spreading cowpea varieties, they quickly cover the soil. That is also another form, but yeah, it is a challenge in the dry season, in the dry areas, because those are the areas also you get very little biomass, as the previous question. So the question is, if farmers use the little mulch they have, the yield benefits coming from the CA, do they offset the other opportunity cost for residue use? For us, this is still a very big research question. Yeah.
Let's try the video now. We have 5 minutes. It's 7 minutes. We'll go over time a bit. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Christian Thierfelder. I work for the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center. And I have been fortunate to do research on conservation agriculture systems in Southern Africa since 2004. My work has been on station with process research on conservation agriculture and on farm, where we try to adapt conservation agriculture to the needs of smallholder farmers. Our experiences with the systems were generally positive. It's a system well adapted to the environment, and we tested it from environments of about 450, 500 millimeters to about 1,700 millimeters of rainfall on soil types of 62-63% sand to 50% clay maybe. It is difficult to generalize conservation agriculture systems because there are many. As long as we follow the 3 principles of conservation agriculture, we can call it CA. How to implement the system is very site-specific. It depends on what farmers have, what kind of implements they use, what kind of animals or machinery they have in their farms. In Malawi, for example, we practiced conservation agriculture with a dibble stick. In other areas, we use planting basins. Where animal traction is common, we use ripline seeding systems or direct seeding systems. And in areas where they have tractors, we used also tractors to seed and prepare the land. As you know, conservation agriculture is, like any other system, not without challenges. It's the way we implement it under this environment, the residues that we need to maintain in mixed crop livestock systems, the way we can control the weeds with hose or herbicides, the access to fertilizer and other important inputs like machinery, the level of knowledge by farmers and extension officers, and many other challenges that we face that are not unique to CA but to agriculture in Southern Africa. I think we managed in a lot of environments to make it work, but we also failed in some where CA cannot be made work. These are mainly the areas where you have waterlogged conditions, where the soil is very sandy and very degraded, and where we have cool climates. Now, besides the challenges, we have to face also a lot of knowledge gaps amongst the extension and farmers, and we try to address those through trainings and hands-on experiences in target communities with farmers, and there we evaluated technologies in collaboration with the farming community. I don't think that you can have a fixed recipe or one system that you can make work for every farmer. It has to be very site-specific and adapted to his or her situation. Where we're working right now is how to better integrate it into the farming system. You know, in Southern Africa, there is a lot of crop livestock interaction, so the competition for residues is high. So we integrate more and more green manures or tree-based systems into CA systems to overcome that problem with the residues. Also, the access to fertilizer is a critical issue, and some argue that you really have to have enough fertilization to make systems work. I agree with that. However, what is needed is to make use of the available resources that we have and maybe plant crops as well that help to reduce the dependency on mineral fertilizer. What we also experienced is that often CA has been promoted in very strict and very inflexible approaches, and we try to break those up by making use of these possibilities that we have in these integrated systems. Also needs to make sure that farmers understand the system and don't see it just as another technology. They need to understand why the three principles are needed, because otherwise it is very complicated for farmers to really reap the benefits over time. It is important to have farmers on board in the evaluation of technologies. It's not only that CA is more profitable, it's also more productive and sustainable because it reduces the climate impact. So, in my view, the next steps for conservation agriculture are required to better integrate those into the farming systems, taking care of the different farm types and farm typologies. Also, making use of the available resources that we have, improve their use, integrate other crops, not only cereals into the systems, but green manures, legumes, to improve the general fertility of the soil and reduce dependencies. But it has to come from the farmers as well. In the long term, I hope that we can get away with manual systems and move more and more into animal traction and mechanized systems, because that's the need. We have too much labor burdens on farmers, especially women and men. So the more they can reduce that burden, the more they will profit from conservation agriculture. In CIMMYT we have various programs underway to strengthen those. Integration of green manures and legumes into the farming system, mechanization and trainings. So we will eventually get more and more adoption of this very promising cropping system. Thank you.
Let's appreciate Dr. Leonard just now.